Imagine you are the most powerful military commander in the ancient world. You have 25,000 soldiers at your back, the finest archers alive, infantry that has never lost, cavalry that has shattered every army from Egypt to India. You have already won before a single sword is drawn. You swept through the Aegean, taking islands without breaking a sweat. You besieged one of Greece's most powerful cities and broke it in 6 days.
6 days. You deported its entire population, crossed the sea, and chose your ground. A wide, flat plain, perfect for your horses, perfect for your numbers, perfect for the slaughter. Up on the hill wait 10,000 Athenians, outnumbered, terrified, waiting for reinforcements that are not coming. You are not worried. You have done this 100 times, and then you make one decision, one small, logical, completely reasonable decision about where to position your cavalry.
And that single move hands Greece the most famous military victory in human history. His name was Datis. He did not lose at Marathon. He handed it away. And for 2.5 millennia, nobody asked why. The morning begins like every other morning of the standoff. Miltiades is awake before the sun, standing on the edge of the Greek position in the foothills above Marathon, looking down at the Persian camp on the plain below, watching, counting, calculating. On this morning, he sees it. The horses are moving, not toward the Greek position, not toward the plain where cavalry fights, toward the ships. The Persian cavalry, the weapon that has kept 10,000 Athenians pinned on this hillside for days, is being loaded onto Persian transport vessels, quietly, efficiently. Miltiades does not hesitate. We attack right now. The reaction from his commanders is immediate confusion. The Persians still have 25,000 soldiers on the plain. They still have archers. They still vastly outnumber the Greeks. Why now? What has changed? Everything has changed. There is no time to explain. There is only the window, narrow, closing by the minute, and the knowledge that if they do not move within the hour, the window will be gone. The cavalry will be on the ships. The ships will be rounding Cape Sunium. And Athens, 25 miles away, will be completely undefended. He does not wait for consensus. The man Darius trusted. Datis was not a reckless general. He was one of the most experienced commanders in the Persian military, a man of Median origin who had risen through the ranks of the most sophisticated military machine the ancient world had produced. Darius I did not give campaigns to subordinates he doubted. Greece had humiliated Persia, not once, twice. In 499 BC, the Greek cities of Ionia revolted against Persian rule. Athens sent 20 ships to support the rebels. Those ships helped burn Sardis, one of Persia's most important regional capitals. Darius was so enraged that he had a servant stand beside him at every meal and repeat 3 times, "Master, remember the Athenians." For 9 years, he remembered. Then in 492 BC, his son-in-law Mardonius was sent to punish Greece. His fleet was destroyed in a storm off Mount Athos. Greece survived by accident of weather. In 490 BC, Darius assembled a different kind of expedition, a precise, fast, punitive naval campaign. He gave command to Datis with specific objectives: subdue the Aegean island states, destroy Eretria, destroy Athens, and bring back Hippias, the exiled Athenian tyrant who would be reinstalled under Persian authority, transforming Athens from a defiant democracy into a compliant client state. Datis executed the first objectives cleanly. He swept through the Cyclades without resistance. At Delos, the sacred birthplace of Apollo, he sacrificed 300 talents of frankincense, a deliberate signal. This was not a war of religion. It was a war of submission. Then he turned to Eretria, besieged the city, broke it in 6 days, deported the entire population to Persia. When he landed at Marathon, he was ahead of schedule. His army was intact. His cavalry was fresh. He had done everything right. The landing site was not chosen by Datis. It was chosen by Hippias, the former tyrant of Athens, the man Datis had been sent to restore. He had been living in Persian exile for nearly 20 years. He knew Attica better than anyone alive. Marathon offered everything a Persian commander needed. A long, flat beach for offloading cavalry horses. Behind it, a wide coastal plain with almost no terrain features to disrupt cavalry movement. The hills and marshes on either flank would funnel any Greek defensive force toward the center, where Persian cavalry and archers could operate at maximum effectiveness. Hippias understood Greek warfare. He knew hoplites were devastating in close combat and nearly suicidal charging across open plain against horses. Marathon was chosen specifically to turn the Greek army's greatest strength into its greatest liability. For days, the Athenians did not move. 10,000 hoplites and 1,000 soldiers from Plataea held the high ground above the plain. They could not advance onto flat ground, not with Persian cavalry waiting. The first side to move onto the wrong terrain would lose. Inside the Athenian command, the standoff was producing a crisis. 10 elected generals, plus a war archon named Callimachus, held the deciding vote in deadlocks. 5 generals voted to attack. 5 voted to wait for the Spartans, who could not march until their religious festival ended. Miltiades went to Callimachus privately. Waiting handed every advantage to Datis. And if Datis moved first, sailed to attack Athens directly, the army at Marathon would have to march 25 miles back, exhausted, to defend a city the Persians would reach first by sea. Callimachus voted to attack, but the timing still belonged to Miltiades, and Miltiades was still watching the plain below, waiting for the one moment that would make the attack survivable. What was Datis actually thinking during the standoff? He had supplies, he had time. What he did not have was a way to force the Athenians off the high ground without losing his cavalry advantage. He was not willing to throw infantry uphill against disciplined hoplites when he did not have to. So he looked for a way to make the high ground irrelevant. He would divide his force, load the cavalry back onto the transport ships, sail south, round the tip of Attica at Cape Sunion, and land at Phaleron, the main harbor of Athens, a few miles from the city itself. Athens, with its army committed at Marathon, would be completely undefended. The moment the Athenians received word that their city was under attack, they would face an impossible choice: stay at Marathon and let Athens burn, or abandon their position, march 25 miles in full armor, and arrive exhausted at Phaleron to find Persian cavalry already deployed outside the city walls. Either way, Datis wins. It required one thing. The cavalry had to be loaded first. Horses were slow and dangerous to embark under pressure. The loading had to happen before any fighting began. This meant there would be a window, a period when the Persian army on the beach would be without its most dangerous weapon. Datis calculated the window as acceptable. The loading would happen quietly, By the time the Athenians realized the cavalry was gone, the ships would already be underway. He did not account for the Ionians.
Inside the Persian camp, not everyone wanted to be there. The Ionian Greeks, soldiers from the Greek cities of Asia Minor, drafted into Persian service, had watched Datis destroy Eretria. They had seen Greek civilians deported to Mesopotamia. They were being marched toward a battle against their own people. When the cavalry began loading onto the transport ships, the Ionians saw it, and several of them made a decision.
The Suda, a Byzantine dictionary preserving fragments of much older sources, records the moment precisely. When the cavalry departed, the Ionian deserters climbed trees and gave a signal to the Athenians that the cavalry had gone. Climbed trees and gave a signal.
Without that signal, Miltiades might not have known in time. He might have watched without being certain. He might have debated, waited, missed the window entirely. Instead, he knew, immediately, with certainty. He gave the order. The two armies were separated by roughly 1.5 miles of open plain. Miltiades ordered the entire hoplite line to advance at a run. A hoplite carried a bronze helmet, a bronze cuirass, bronze greaves, a large round shield nearly 1 meter across, and an ashwood spear nearly 3 meters long. Running across open ground in that equipment, in formation, this was not standard practice. But Miltiades understood something about Persian archers that most Greek commanders did not. Persian archers were devastating against stationary targets, but against a formation moving at a run, the time of exposure within arrow range was dramatically reduced. If the Greek line could survive the volleys and close to contact before the Persians could reset, the entire archery advantage evaporated the moment the formations made contact. The Athenians came down off the hills and ran.
You are running. The weight of your armor is immense. Bronze pressing on your shoulders, your chest, your shins with every stride. The shield in your left hand weighs as much as a small child. The spear in your right hand pulls you sideways. The ground shifts beneath your feet. First the hard dirt of the hillside, then the flat open plain. Short dry grass crunching under thousands of sandals in the August heat.
There is dust everywhere. 10,000 men at a run kick up a wall of it. The men on either side of you are silhouettes inside a brown haze. You can hear the man to your left breathing hard. You can hear the shields, a constant low percussion of bronze against arm guards, spear shafts rattling against rims. The Persian line is ahead. Through the dust, a row of large rectangular wicker shields planted edge to edge, forming a wall behind which archers have their bows raised. Then, the arrows. The first volley sounds like tearing cloth, a single mass release, the sound arriving half a second before the arrows themselves. Men go down. You do not stop. Stopping on open ground under arrow fire is a slower death than moving forward. The Greek line hits the Persian wall.
The phalanx drives into the wicker shields at full running momentum. Those shields were designed as a stable firing platform for archers. They were not designed for this. The front of the Persian line buckles. But the Persian center holds. Datis' elite infantry, the Sparabara and the Saka warriors, push back. Professional soldiers. The Greek center, thinned to 4 ranks deep to extend the line across the full Persian front, begins to give way.
The Persians push through the Greek center. Persian infantry pours through the gap, driving toward the Greek rear, certain the battle is collapsing. If the gap widens, the battle is over. But the Greek wings are 8 ranks deep, and they had driven the Persian flanks all the way to the shoreline. And now, instead of scattering in pursuit, the Greek wings wheeled inward. They turned, and they closed on the Persian center from both sides simultaneously. The Persians who had broken through looked left, Greek hoplites closing. They looked right, Greek hoplites closing. In front, the Athenians they had just pushed through now turned to face them. The encirclement completed. What followed was not a battle. It was a collapse.
The Persian line disintegrated. Men ran for the ships. 7 Persian ships were captured before they could push off from shore. Herodotus records the count: 6,400 Persians dead, 192 against 6,400.
Marathon was over, but Datis still had his cavalry, still had his ships, still had his plan. He sailed south, around Cape Sunion, toward Athens. The Athenians understood before the ships disappeared from sight. Miltiades left 2,000 men to guard the battlefield. The remaining 8,000 turned and marched. 25 miles, in full armor, after a battle in August. They did not rest. They could not rest. When the Persian fleet approached the harbor at Phaleron, ready to deploy cavalry, ready to take an undefended city, Datis saw something on the heights above the harbor. The Athenian army, in formation, shields up, waiting. They had arrived first. Datis looked at the army on the heights and made his final decision. He turned the fleet around. He sailed back to Asia. On the plain of Marathon, the Athenians built a burial mound, the Soros, over their 192 dead. It still stands today, unchanged in 2,500 years. The Persian dead were buried in mass graves. Their names were not preserved. Datis returned to Persia. The ancient sources record nothing further. No punishment, no account of his reception at court. He simply vanishes from history.
Was Datis' plan wrong? By the standards of ancient military strategy, no. Divide the enemy's attention. Force him to choose between defending his position and defending his city. Apply naval mobility against an army anchored to a fixed line. These are sound operational principles. The plan was not wrong. The sequencing was wrong.
By loading the cavalry while the infantry was still on the beach, Datis created a window, a specific, narrow window during which the Athenians could advance across open ground without being run down by horses. He calculated that this window would not be seen in time. He did not account for Miltiades. Miltiades was a man who had spent years inside the Persian military system, who had marched with Darius on the Scythian campaign in 513 BC, who had watched Persian commanders think, who understood the assumptions that guided their decisions. Persian strategy assumed Greek infantry would not charge cavalry in the open. That assumption had held in every battle Datis had ever fought. Miltiades knew the assumption. He saw the moment it no longer applied. The cavalry is loading. The window is open. The only thing that closes it is time. He charged. There is a quiet tragedy in what happened to Datis.
His plan was operationally sound. He was undone by two variables appearing at the same moment: internal betrayal and an opponent with inside knowledge. He lost not because he was inferior. He lost because the two things he could not control collided at the worst possible instant.
After Marathon, Athens needed a specific story. Courage, democracy defeating tyranny, ordinary citizens standing against an empire. That story is true. The men who ran across the plain were genuinely brave. The 192 in the Soros died for something real. But the complete story, the Ionian deserters in the trees, the cavalry loading onto ships, the window Miltiades calculated and charged through, is more complicated. The victory was not simply Greek courage against Persian numbers. It was Greek intelligence about a Persian mistake, deployed at precisely the right moment.
History simplified that. The version that survived was clean, inspiring, necessary for a city building its identity around what it had just done. Datis had to disappear, not because of anything he did wrong, but because his existence complicated the story Athens needed. A sophisticated Persian commander who almost executed a brilliant strategic maneuver was not the villain that story required. Athens needed an enemy they had simply outfought. They had not simply outfought him. Both things are true. And the second thing is the one history chose not to tell.
Datis arrived at Marathon with 25,000 soldiers, a plan that should have worked, and every advantage a commander could ask for. He left with a failed campaign and a story that history spent 2,500 years refusing to examine. Because the story history preferred was cleaner, braver, simpler. This channel exists for the other version, the one underneath the famous one.